Hello everyone, happy to be here this evening and to speak with you all in this session. In this session, we're gonna discuss meta content moderation policies in Arabic and Hebrew. And together with me in this session are the representatives of the company. In the last year, basically, there were lots of dramatic events that reflected pretty much on the issue of the content moderation. As we know, it started with Sheikh Jarrah and the uprising that happened last May in 2021, where basically there were lots of claims regarding restrictions that Palestinians and allies faced regarding their content, regarding the things that they were reflecting. Basically, all of this was affecting the content. In many cases, we know also people, Palestinians who are living in this neighborhood in general in Palestine, are trying to reflect their daily life, the violations that are happening, and we're facing those policies of that many people basically define as silencing their voices, and policies of over moderation towards the Palestinian content, while if we were looking on the other side, we saw lots of incitement that was happening in the Hebrew language and was not dealt, and it was generally the relevant content was under moderated. So we had this context in the Palestinian-Israeli context. From the other side, later on, what's happened in the past year is also the Russian aggression on Ukraine and the Russian war in the Ukrainian context, which also give us a bit of an insight how some content, when the company is firm and want to deal with issues, how people who are under occupation, under aggression are dealt with, which is the contrary situation if I compare Palestinians and the Ukrainian content. And this raised lots of questions with many people. Is really Meta and the social media companies are global platforms that everybody can be there, everybody can feel, or we are in platforms that are in many ways European/Western centric approach, that basically when it comes to areas that is important for the company, things are allowed, and when it's other companies, things are less allowed. So about these issues and other issues will be discussion. Again, I'm happy to have together with me, Richard Lappin, Meta's head of organic content policy for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and Mazuba Hanayama, head of human rights policy, Africa, Middle East, and Turkey in Meta. Actually, let's start with the issue of the dangerous organizations and individual lists. The discovery basically that was, or the leaked list that was published by The Intercept in the last year also created lots of discussion around this. Again, about how much the company is really having a global look or having more American/European centric approach toward things. Especially if we looked at the names of the people and the entities who were there, many of them were coming from Muslim/MENA background, while looking at, for example, the extremist side, the white supremacists and other groups that are based in the US and Europe, they are hardly representative. And if we zoom in, basically regarding Palestine-Israel, we see that in the Israeli side, there are two names in the dangerous organizations and individual lists. And for those who don't know, these names are not allowed to be on the platform. So we have Benzi Goldstein and we have Lehava organization, which is basically the same person and his organization. But if we look at the Palestinian side, we see more than 55 names of individuals and entities. So again, this proportionate way of looking at things, one side is under moderated, the other side is over moderated. What can you tell us about this?
Well, Nadeem, let me begin by firstly saying thank you for inviting us to this panel. It's something which we really appreciate, to join you for these important discussions. And we wish you all the best with the event in whole. We've seen some of the discussions already and they've been tremendously insightful. As a policymaker, it's always a real pleasure for me to join forums such as this, to share insights about what we're doing at Meta and about our policies. But importantly for me as well, to also hear the views and the feedback of different engaged communities from all around the world. Now, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, but just to give a little bit of context before jumping into that question, we now have more than 3.6 billion people using our services to share and connect across countries, cultures, and languages. And ensuring people can do this freely, but also safely, is crucially important to us. And that's why we have our community standards, for policies, for rules, if you will, of what is and what isn't allowed on our services. And as many of you will be aware, they're published online on our Transparency Centre in a wide range of language. Now, one of those policies is our dangerous individuals and organizations policy. This is a long-standing policy. We've had it in place now for more than 10 years. And under this policy, we ban groups that proclaim a hateful or violent mission or who have engaged in violence in the past. And we ban them from having a presence on our apps and to remove content that represents, praises, or supports them. Now, importantly, we have a really extensive process that we follow in determining which dangerous organizations and individuals we designate. And we've refined this over a number of years in collaboration with academics and organizations from around the world and from across the political spectrum. Specifically, we have definitions and thresholds that we use to assess organizations for potential designation. And our process includes a structured review of each case by a wide range of relevant teams, including policy teams, legal and security as well. And importantly, our definitions and thresholds are designed to be agnostic to region or ideology, and every possible designation goes through exactly the same process. If an organization is designated, it means we put it through this rigorous process with all of the extensive review that this entails, and it's been assessed to meet that threshold.
I think you're on mute.
Yes. So maybe we can dive a little bit into the issue of the comparison between Palestine and Ukraine, because honestly, in the recent few months, this issue really troubled many people, including Palestinians, but also others, like how much things are having the same standards towards the both sides, because we are saying a situation where people in the Ukrainian versus Russian situation that hate speech, actually like very violent speech, incitement, calling for killing of Russian politicians, like the most extreme content that normally the platform would not allow anyone to do, suddenly is legitimate and it's being there, it's not being deleted. While again, with the Palestinian content, that in many cases also it was not really like violent or not calling, was maybe calling for freedom, for the right to resist, etc. Even that content was over moderated and taken down. Like how do you explain this kind of gap? I'm taking the Palestinian example here, but obviously I can go to other areas of occupation, and also you would have a similar situation, especially if it's from the global south, that would be similar also to the Palestinian.
Yeah, thank you, Nadeem. It's an important question. I'll take this one as well. And I think to begin with, these are some of the most challenging topics that we face. I think that's the same for people who are on the ground, and then how we're seeing that manifest on the platform. These are incredibly difficult situations on the ground and on the platform, and one which we give all our thought and care and attention to. Now, I think what we can say is when we've looked at the situation in Ukraine since the Russian invasion began, it's important to know that we've taken a wide range of steps across many different areas to ensure that people can continue to use our apps and services securely and safely to communicate. And we've also taken extensive steps to tackle misinformation, remove content that violates our global policies, and prevent abuse of our platforms by malicious networks of accounts. Now, as a company, what we do at times is we do give guidance to content moderators on how our policies should be interpreted in extraordinary circumstances. And we've sought to ensure that this guidance is consistent with the laws of armed conflict and also human rights principles as well. So some of the decisions we've made have provoked responses internationally from a wide range of communities, sometimes including a little bit of misinterpretation about what our guidance actually entails. So the fact is, in this situation, we allowed Ukrainians to call for national self-defense in the context of the invasion. It's very narrowly scoped guidance, so it applies only within Ukraine and only in the context of speech regarding the Russian military invasion. We made it explicitly clear in our guidance that it's never to be interpreted as condoning violence against Russians in general. Importantly as well, this is a temporary decision taken in extraordinary circumstances, and it's one that we keep, along with the general situation, under constant review at the current time.
But maybe I can make it even a bit more sharper. Like we have the Azov Battalion, which is considered by large sides that it's a neo-Nazi group. This group is very legitimate on Meta platforms. While if I compare with Palestinian political fractions, most of the Palestinian political fraction by Meta are in the DOI list and not allowed. They don't have this Nazi ideology, they don't have this hate, and according to you, I mean, they are engaged in self-defense, the Palestinians are engaged in self-defense. So actually, what's the difference?
Yeah, thanks, Nadeem. A very good question. And again, these are some of the most challenging and difficult situations when we see an evolving and fluid situation on the ground. In this instance, as you alluded to, for the time being, we made a really narrowly scoped decision to allow praise of the Azov regiment strictly in the context of defending Ukraine or in their role as part of the official Ukrainian National Guard. Importantly, though, we continued to ban all hate speech, all hate symbolism, praise of violence, generic praise, support or representation of the Azov regiment, and of course any other content that would violate our community standards. This was a difficult decision to make, a tough one to make, but it helped us to ensure that users have access to official information about Azov's military activity as part of that national defense of Ukraine, including information that's essential to their safety, such as the location and severity of military operations. And this, as I said, is a very narrowly scoped definition on a temporary basis.
Yes. And another comparison is being drawn also now between Israel and Russia and how Meta is dealing with both. So from one hand, the Russian media outlets are being restricted in your platforms in many ways, or let's say accounts that are official or official media that belong to the Russian state. While, for example, there are many pages that belong to the Israeli secret services, the Israeli army speakers. Many of them are also engaged actively in spreading fake news, including, for example, the killing of the Palestinian American famous journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who recently was killed by the Israeli army. And then the Israeli army was releasing fake news around who killed her. And there was any kind of restriction towards her. But from the other hand, I mean, we see the restrictions that you are doing with the state-owned or state-controlled media and other official accounts. So why the difference? Why this kind of double standards of dealing with both sides?
I can perhaps jump in here, Nadeem. Firstly, say thank you so much, as Richard said, for having us here. It's a real privilege to be able to engage with a larger community and folks who are taking these issues seriously on our platform and holding us to account, which is really, really important. So as you mentioned, Nadeem, I really want to start off by just conveying our condolences to Shireen's family. We understand this is a very, very difficult time and a tragic loss. And for those who are, working to ensure that there is greater coverage of certain stories, we understand that this has come as a blow, and we really just want to say a heartfelt condolences. And then, yes, to get into your question a little bit more, I think, again, as Richard has said, some of these are really, really difficult things that we've been grappling with. But if we think back, in 2020, we started providing greater transparency on all of the accounts and pages from state-controlled media outlets, because we thought this was important for people to know the kinds of news they're reading and where it is coming from, and to understand if a publication may be under the influence of a state or a government. So during the war, we have received many requests from several European governments requesting that we restrict Russian state-controlled media. And given the nature of the situation, we made the decision to restrict access to RT and Sputnik across the EU. As you are aware, government requests of these kinds are not new to us, and we always assess such requests against our community standards, and we ensure commitments to human rights and to the country's local laws, and we therefore make decisions accordingly.
Yes, one of the developments in the last year is also the third-party investigation or examination of content moderation in Arabic and in Hebrew that was created after the events in Sheikh Jarrah, and lots of conversation that was also including an oversight board of Facebook and Meta. And we see this and we appreciate this development, because having the company agreeing for this and commissioning a third party and walking through the process is acknowledging also that maybe there are things that should be fixed or developed in a way that it would be more equal. But can you tell us about the results of this examination?
Sure. As you are aware, and I think some others that we partnered with, this has been a long process that has enabled us to think a little bit more carefully about some of the issues that you're raising here. We are still inside of this process. We hope to be able to share recommendations and where things are soon, but this is still underway.
Many people, Mazuba, actually are also kind of concerned that maybe there would be some good results out of it, but that it would be put in somewhere in a shelf or somebody that, or actually that maybe it won't be shown to the public. So maybe you can, is there a commitment from the side of the company, from your side, first of all, to share it with the public, whatever regardless the results are, and is there a commitment also to fix and to go through the recommendations of this commissioned party? Because also we don't want, again, a situation where there is some kind of committee that is examining, absorbing the pressure, and then, we continue same as before.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in line with our human rights policy, we do conduct due diligences, and we are required, according to our human rights policy and commitments, to conduct these due diligences and ensure that we act upon them. So absolutely, we have no intention of putting this on the shelf to gather dust. This is an important issue. The events of May were, difficult, and we really want to do the best that we can to ensure that this due diligence is taken seriously within the company.
Great. Another question or issue that is actually influencing a lot the Palestinian content moderation issue, which is basically the Israeli cyber unit that has been dramatically sending takedown requests. Many of them are not obliged by legal decisions, but maybe according to their interpretation based on the community guidelines of the platform, and then they are asking for these takedowns. Why this relationship is not transparent? Why you are not like sharing these so-called voluntary basis takedown requests from the Israeli cyber unit, and by the way, from other government cyber units, but specifically with the Israeli case, because we are talking also of a case of occupation. Why is this relationship not transparent?
I think it might be useful here to just talk a little bit about our community standards enforcement report, as well as our content restrictions based on local law report. So in our Transparency Center, we regularly publish several reports, and it's important to distinguish between them, right? So the Community Standards Enforcement Report is where we publish numbers about enforcement on all of our policies. We also provide details on trends and breakdown per policy area. And this report predominantly focuses on content that violates our community standards, which includes all report types, whether by government entities or any user of our platforms. We sometimes receive reports of content that don't violate our community standards, but it violates local law. So we may restrict the content's availability in the country where it is alleged to be illegal, and that is what we publish in the content restrictions based on local law report. Just important to make that distinction there.
Right. The other issue that comes along with is, in this case, there's an occupation of West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza Strip. So the issue that comes out is basically the jurisdiction, like how the company, the platforms look in terms of legality, in terms of requests that are coming from the Israeli cyber unit that are not about Israeli citizens, but rather about Palestinian citizens in an area that is recognized internationally by the UN decisions, by the international law, etc., as occupied area. So how you deal with the jurisdiction issues?
I can jump in here again too. I think it might be out of turn for me or for Richard and I to respond to this. I think this is really a question for our legal team and something that we can perhaps get back to you on. But I would be hesitant to speak out of turn because I think, as you have rightly said, this is an issue of international law and will be better served by a response from our legal team.
I mean, and in the same line, like many Palestinians have been protesting the issue of allowing Israeli settlements to advertise content that is about buildings in the settlements and expanding. And as we know, settlements is a crime under the international law. So again, the question is why the platform is allowing this advertisement from the beginning? Why not allow them or disallow them?
I think my response may be a bit unsatisfactory here because I think this too, in following up from your first question, is probably one that our legal team can provide a little bit more of a clearer response to. Richard, were you going to jump in here? I thought you had unmuted.
To say very similar to you, Mazu, but unfortunately, I know that's probably not the response you'd want right now, but it's probably best for us to check back on that. We'd be happy to get back to you on that. And maybe just the other thing I would add here is that's why it's so helpful for us to join panels such as this and hear these concerns directly. It gives us a very important insight or can reaffirm important insights from the ground, from different communities that we can take away and certainly reflect on and certainly get back to you as well, Nadine.
I mean, another question is about the Israeli government attempt to legislate the new so-called Facebook bill, or in its another name, it's removing harmful content. As we know, and Hamli issued also a legal analysis of this, and many other human rights organizations, including Palestinians, Israeli, and others, are very alarmed of this attempt. And we hope that it would not succeed finally, but if it succeeds, it's created a really great challenge for freedom of expression online. And as we know, this law speaks about the possibility of having order coming or decisions coming from courts in one side position, not having the other side also defending himself with secret evidence, etc., but basically orders any website, including social media platform, to take down the content. That by the court itself, it's either by their interpretation by the Israeli laws, it's illegal or inciting, etc. We know that, and from past experience, this has been used a lot on Palestinian content mainly. So this is something that will be harming, obviously, I mean, the freedom of expression. It will have also another sections that also not even about the website, but also about internet service providers, etc. So there is a great concern about this, and our question is how Meta is planning to deal with it in case it will pass the Knesset voting and will become a law.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that we probably need to get into a little bit more detail around the legislation. I don't have all of it in front of me at the moment, but it is something that we can absolutely look into. As a company, we've often said that we're open to working with legislators to reach effective regulation. And to the points that you've raised, there may be some things for us to review and to better understand. And that's definitely something that and my team would be happy to work on, and other teams at the company.
In case it's basically passed, I mean, so generally, as you said before, you will be dealing with it only with some kind of geofencing. So basically, in certain areas in Israel, it would be shown. In other areas, it would be shown. Or this is something that you're still considering?
Sorry, looking for my unmute. Yes, it's definitely something that we'd have to better understand. I wouldn't be able to say definitively right now, but as I mentioned, we would be very happy and are keen to look into this further.
Right. Another issue related to the issues of content moderation in Arabic. I mean, from our experience, also Hamle has been recording and documenting many cases of content that is being removed and also appealing. In many cases, it was also around mistakes and actually the content was reinstated. So our question is like how you're doing, or what are you doing actually to try to make improvement in the content moderation in a way that you would understand more the content, that there won't be different mistakes around it?
Thanks, Nadeem. Yeah, content moderation is a huge issue. It's something that we take quite seriously and always looking to improve how we do it. So perhaps in addition to this independent human rights due diligence that is underway, we did our own investigation and process review. And as you know, but also is important to just sort of remind folks, we operate at a very large scale. And as such, we're often trying to solve complex problems, which, understandably change takes a while to implement, but although necessary. Our content reviewers are all native Arabic speakers, but unfortunately, as you have mentioned, mistakes do happen. Our operations team continuously do quality checks and provide reviewers with policy clarifications and context to support them with the review process. In addition, we continuously check our automated actions to make sure our machine learning technology is working well. But perhaps just to go a little bit further here, because I think specifically we're thinking about Arabic content moderation. I'm not a fluent Arabic speaker, but I believe anyone who does speak Arabic is aware that in the region, Arabic is a very complex language with a rich, diverse dialects. And so we try our best to ensure that we have representation in different parts of MENA to ensure that our content moderators are moderating Arabic content that they are well and familiar with.
Yeah, because just to continue this line of discussions, because critics and criticism on Meta was around having subcontracted companies doing the Arabic content moderations, that there are people that are underpaid and have less abilities or less skilled. Other content that also around the dialect issue, that the dialect also having people from the Maghreb doing content moderation for the Mashriq and not understanding the content. So is really this something that went through a process of improvement?
Yes, absolutely. So based on research results and recommendations, we definitely improved our support. And we took the first step to split the Arabic market into two major distinctive markets back in 2017, Maghreb, which represents the North African dialects, and the Middle East, which serves the rest of the Arabic-speaking countries. And in the past year, our teams have been working on splitting markets further to support distinctive dialects, such as the Levant or the Gulf, for example. But as I mentioned before, our operations are very complex, and therefore we need to make sure we're taking the steps in the right direction before implementation. But we recognize the importance of this action.
Right, thank you. So, I mean, we have been trying to cover in this conversation the different issues, including the comparison with Ukraine, the different developments. But I also wanted, maybe as a last questions, what actions or approaches that you as a company trying to do in order to have also more communication and more dialogue with the Palestinian society? There is a strong feeling, and it's beyond feeling, it's also about facts and different approaches that the company took in the previous years, that the Palestinian public felt that it's biased, that there was no conversation with the Palestinian public opinion, that the company was not investing in for example, in the Palestinian market, in companies and technological companies, and opening up for jobs for younger Palestinians, as it does in other areas. So maybe you can just tell us also about this and about how the company is trying also to start this communication in a better way.
Go ahead, Richard.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Nadeem. This is a great question, and I'm sure Mazuba will have some points to add to this as well. From my side, I would just highlight how important it is for us to have conversations like the one we've had today in a wide variety of different contexts. I think I mentioned towards the beginning that as a policymaker, it's always one of the most exciting parts of my job is hearing directly how people see our policies and see rooms for improvement and see times when they're not working. We're very much of a belief that our policies are a living document, if you will. And if you look at our Transparency Centre, there's a change log, and you can actually track those changes over time, which is great for transparency, but I think it really underlines as well just that we're always adapting, always refining our policies based on the things that we're seeing on the platform and adapting to those environments. I think working with you in this event today, and I know we've been involved in a number of different engagements throughout the region too, is just tremendously important for us, and it's something that we look to continue doing with our colleagues in different parts of the company to make sure that we get that input. Mazuba, you may have things to add to that as well.
Yeah, just to augment that, I mean, just to say really, my team, for example, having a human rights team in region, one of the important parts around it is to develop these relationships in country, in region. And so a major part of our strategy is fostering relationships with Palestinian organizations, individuals. We do this across the Middle East, North Africa. We do this across sub-Saharan Africa. And it's a key strategy for us because, to Richard's point, we are only served by increasing our relationships, our dialogue, our support with external organizations. And we often learn and grow in the process, and that's a really, really important thing for us. So that's what we're here to do, and happy to be held to account in doing so.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mazuba. And we really hope, I mean, as a part of the Palestinian civic society and generally the human rights community, we hope that the company would go to directions that are more just and transparent and equal for all, that it would be less influenced by the power relations that are out there, that the whole issue of content moderation, whether it's in the Palestinian context, but also in other contexts, are dealt really with one global policy towards all open, without this power bias that we feel from time to time. We started seeing changes, and we hope that these changes would be really realized and materialized in the near future. Thank you for joining us, and back to you, Yasmin.